The lives we live in this world seem to bounce between two opposing realities. The first is built on a belief, or maybe even illusion, that there is certainty and solid structures to support and make sense of our lives. The second reality is built on the limits of what we know about life and how it works, a reality that has at its foundation the ideas of impermanence, emergence, and not knowing. In our latest podcast, we are going to hear from Eveline van den Heuvel about the part of her that will not leave, the part that is deeply curious about the second of these realities, where there is always something beyond what we currently know and experience. A little bit of context about where we are recording this podcast, because it will help you with some of the noises you may hear. We're on the Noordwijk dunes in the Netherlands. It's a sunny day. So you will hear birds, you may hear planes fly over, you may hear a dog panting in the background every now and then, but we try to find somewhere a bit sheltered so there's no wind. I know that for Eveline, one of the things that's never left her is a real love of nature. It's nice to be sat outside having these conversations. Welcome Jess the dog, who is now digging a big hole in front of us. We're going to see how we get on with this.
Thank you, Rob. It's nice to be here as a guest on the podcast this time.
So, Eveline, tell me a little bit about what it is that you want to talk about today in light of the thing that won't leave you, won't go away.
I think it was interesting because we started having a conversation about this. And as we were having a conversation about it, we kind of came to the conclusion and the realization that the thing that doesn't leave me is this sort of habitual thing that I do where I constantly let go of existing structures. And I'll explain a little bit what that means. So I really have an enormous curiosity. And I think my curiosity has always driven a lot of my choices in life. But it extends probably beyond what many people find comfortable. And what I do with my curiosity is I'll grab onto like a new idea or a new philosophy or a new practice and I'll swear by it. And it'll be the thing that I want to tell everybody about, and I want to understand it from a scientific point of view, and I want to get fully into it. And then as I rest in it, I start to unpick the bits. I start to like untangle the structure and pick at it until there's very little of that thing left over, and I'll move on to the next thing. And I think for some people around me, that's been quite an uncomfortable experience.
Eveline can take us into ideas and concepts quite quickly and quite deeply. Sometimes for me, I like to hear a concrete example to help me see how these ideas play out in life.
One of the typical stories I tell people about is, I turned 30, and by the age of 30, I'd lived in 30 homes. But I'm 44 now, and I've lived in 46 or 47 homes by now. And so that's just a very, very tangible, practical example of, wow, this person cannot seem to settle in any one place and really just stay within a structure of a particular home or even a particular car. So there seems to be something quite material about that as well. But if I give an example from a more maybe personal philosophy point of view, I would say when I was 18 and I didn't really know what to go and study at university, I discovered neuroscience because I had a great professor of neuroscience at the liberal arts college that I was attending. And I completely fell in love with it, and I was convinced that, knowing everything about the brain was the thing that I was meant to do, was the thing I was meant to be. And so I pursued that academically initially. But then I run into what for me seem like limitations in a particular frame of mind or scientific theory or understanding or even choice of direction can offer in terms of explaining to me what this human experience is about. So in academia, I started to realize, like, wow, our Western way of approaching life and the human experience is quite narrow. And what about all the sort of more Eastern ancient traditions and philosophies? What about that? And so then I started to pursue that, and I went down this whole avenue of meditation and mindfulness and breath work and alternative practices and understanding that. And then that becomes sort of almost like the next frontier or edge of my understanding of this human experience. And then I get to a particular edge or a limitation, a perceived limitation, and I want to go beyond that again. And so, currently I'm exploring the world of intuition, which is actually, it's a word to describe expanding beyond what we consider the accepted understandings of how intellect and consciousness work. So, we think that we produce our thoughts and our imaginations and creativity. They are produced by my brain, right? My brain creates a particular experience of mine as a human being, as an individual, with my set of skills and my curiosities. But neuroscientists like Donald Hoffman are actually saying, well, the materialist paradigm doesn't uphold, and so far there's been no theory of consciousness that can say, well, this particular firing of neurons gives rise to the taste of coffee, for example. So they're saying, actually, we need to turn the theory on its head. Consciousness is fundamental, and consciousness is giving rise to a material experience of life. So from his point of view, we're wearing these sort of virtual reality glasses that, we're seeing the world in 3D because that's our body, that's our biology, that's how we were made. But actually, the world has multi thousands of dimensions. We don't even understand what that even looks like or means. And so I get really curious about that.
In this conversation, I both love and find uncomfortable this moving between ideas such as consciousness and moving house 47 times. How do these things connect? I know they do, but how and what does living beyond what we know and experience even look like? You're always looking for what is beyond what we currently know or experience.
Yeah.
There's something about the part of you that doesn't take things for granted. Someone has said this is how it is, and I'll accept that fully. You want to go and check that out. You immerse yourself in it fully, and then you start to find out what's beyond it.
Yeah, and I have always been curious by, the stories that have stayed with me across my life have been those of, miraculous recoveries, or people who have broken certain, the classical example of the 4-minute mile that was then broken, and somebody did it in 3:55, and then all of a sudden all other athletes were able to do it in 3:55. Those phenomena are so fascinating to me because it means that somebody puts up some fictitious boundary and says that's what's possible for us, until somebody goes beyond that, and then whatever went beyond that is now what's become possible for us. But you could probably do that ad infinitum, is my guess. And so I'm super curious about what happens when we get to a particular boundary, and how do we go past that particular boundary. I think that's really phenomenal. What lies beyond those boundaries? And that's what I'm always trying to find, I think.
You've mentioned a couple of what those boundaries might be, or those paradigms, about nature of consciousness and stuff. If you were to come back a little bit from that and say, okay, for people who are listening on their daily lives, what are the sort of things that you're thinking, okay, here are the boundaries that I see that in your work with people, that I see people butt up against?
Yeah.
What are the things that you see?
Yeah, I mean, you'll know this because we'll have very robust conversations about this. But one of the things I'll see in the area, in the realm of mental health, obviously, is this idea of a particular diagnosis. People get a diagnosis of something, or their child gets a diagnosis of ADHD. And I'm not disregarding that. Maybe there's a helpful element to receiving a diagnosis, and I'll get to that. But what I also see is that all of a sudden then people start to live up to the boundary of that diagnosis and not beyond. I love the story of the woman who was in like severe clinical psychiatric hospitals for a long part of her life with schizophrenia, which is known as a mental disorder that people have genetically and they never heal from. And yet she will say, I healed from my schizophrenia. And she does. She currently works as a psychotherapist. And one of the things that helped her to get there was actually a male nurse who would sit with her at night and who was the only one who would just speak to her as a human being and ask her about what she was feeling and what she was experiencing. And she started to realize that a lot of her visual hallucinations of like wolves eating her calf muscles were actually unexpressed fear and anxiety, like emotions. And when she started understanding that, those hallucinations started to loosen their grip on her. So that sort of stuff really fascinates me, and I see that happen even with when I work with people. It doesn't have to be a diagnosis, but it can be some sort of belief or a story. We all have particular beliefs, whether we like it or not, whether we're aware of them or not. We have fundamental limiting beliefs that dictate a lot of what we think is possible for us in life. So I'm willing to bet that all of us have a version of a fundamental belief that says something around, other people can have this, but I can't. Other people are capable of this, but I'm not. Other people are powerful in this way, but I'm not powerful, right? So whether that is in the realm of like creativity or financial wealth or freedom or intimate relationships, like we all have something that limits us. And then what we see is that we behave accordingly. And actually what we get back from the outside world is kind of evidence that says, yeah, in fact, you are limited in that way. But we can create and we can expand beyond those limitations.
I'm not sure about you, but as I'm listening, I'm noticing my own beliefs that limit. And I'm wondering what I can do or apply to move beyond them. What does it feel like to move beyond them?
Recently, I have come across a structure, a technology that actually helps people to do that, which is super exciting.
We will hear a little bit more about this later. Okay, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, how can you help people dismantle the labels and the form they've almost put around themselves that keeps them where they are? Yeah, so
Yeah.
That sounds really helpful. And I'm wondering also, I've had times in my life where I think I have let go of structure and it feels terrifying. It seems like there's an infinite curiosity and an ability to be really passionate about something, and here's a great structure, here's a great model, here's a great theory, and then get to it and walk beyond it, walk through it almost. Yeah. So I see that as a real positive thing and it's a great thing. But I suppose, what's that like as an experience for you as a human?
In some ways, I would say I don't know better. You know what I mean? Because I think like people will look at my life and they'll say like, man, but it takes a lot of courage to do some of the stuff that you do and to, have your entire life dismantled and then remantle it again. But I would also say that I'm getting to a point in my life where I realize, man, certain fundamental structures are really helpful. So it's helpful to have both. It's taken a long time for me to get to the place where I realize, okay, the structures that were kind of imposed on me, and I don't mean that as if I was a victim to them, but just like that I was raised in, like a particular academic structure or a particular like cultural structure, like expectations of by the time you reach 40, you have built a career, you have had 1.5 children and have an intimate partner, long lasting, and bought a house. And I had to go through the pain of, well, I have not bought a house and I will likely maybe never buy a house. And is that okay? So I had to come up against the barriers of all of those structures to realize, well, maybe those are also not the structures necessarily that are so important or relevant to me. To now go into a place where I also start to see, okay, what foundational structures are relevant and important to me. So having, a stable place to live where I can anchor and root and where I can feel at home and it's not something, a stress that I need to carry. That's a really helpful structure.
Just trying to understand this a bit. It sounds like a lot of us in the world, and I think this story has told us, is that we need to create security and stability because we want to feel safe, we want to feel stable, we want to have some sense of knowing what is happening around us so we feel safe. And it feels like that's not a natural thing for you.
No.
So it's almost like it's about moving beyond that notion or the myth maybe of security and seeing what is beyond it. I'm becoming increasingly curious what it is that enables Eveline to constantly move to edges and beyond and still be okay. What is the structure that holds her?
Hearing you say that is making me realize something, that fundamentally what I've learned through, I guess, dismantling all the external structures or coming up against the barriers and then moving past the barriers of all those external structures, is that I can rely very, very strongly on something in me that is unwavering. So there is an internal structure. I have a particular trust in myself and a relationship with myself. I have a deeply rooted faith that I'm going to be okay no matter what. I will be okay. I can be okay in even the craziest of circumstances. And I think part of that is I've learned that I was okay in crazy circumstances, right? So I've taken myself through that lived experience. But that's interesting that maybe that's what I am sometimes pulling people towards, like, just let go of that external structure and something will catch you. You will catch you. But we don't necessarily get taught how to believe in that, how to build that relationship with that inner foundation that then is unwavering.
So it's almost like you have, on one level, you found the structure that's really important to you.
Yeah, and it's inside me.
Which is a really internal structure.
Yes. Yeah. And it's about a really compassionate, kind relationship to myself. Because in the midst, when everything is falling apart, I have a very strong voice that can sit with me and say, I've got you. It's all going to be okay. You're not alone in this. You can rest here. You can still breathe. I can make it through any moment with that internal voice. But having this conversation with you is making me realize, like, oh, that not everybody has listened to that voice. I think everybody does have that voice. Personally, I really believe all of us have that fundamental thing in us that is unwavering.
And do you think it was a decision that you made that led you to, that's the thing I'm going to rely on? Was it a decision? Was it circumstantial?
Yeah.
What was it that meant that you accessed that bit that, you say you believe everybody has?
I think that was really strong in me when I was a kid. When I was a child, I heard that voice very strongly. I spent a lot of time with that voice because I spent a lot of time playing alone and in my own imagination. So I spent a lot of time in dialogue with myself, so to speak. And then I think at a young age, I also experienced certain things that at that moment in time, that's what I relied on to get through. So by the age of 10, being uprooted, I think, for the third time. But then the first time that it was really in my conscious awareness, and it came with a lot of hardship of having to let go of basically all my friendships and the home and the place that I knew, and going into a country where kids were, from my point of view, they were quite different. They were much more direct, and my experience of them was quite, they were quite brutal. That was a really difficult experience, but the thing that I relied on to get through it was just myself, my own voice, my inner voice.
So listening to that, it's almost like you with a sense of, actually, I've learned to do that because there were circumstances that mean I had to rely on something that was more than just what was going on around me, because what was going on around me wasn't comfortable or safe.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I had to find some other place. It feels like it builds a real resilience in you. I hear that, and I'm wondering what's the Achilles heel of that? Do you know what I mean? Because it feels that's a really strong thing about, I can go internal and rely. I know I'll be okay. And
yeah, well, I mean, the Achilles heel is that there's an over-reliance on that. And so there's like an underappreciation of the external systems.
Okay.
There's, like I said, with my moving around houses, and because it takes an enormous amount of energy, money, stress, time, everything to constantly uproot yourself and move to a new place. So I was recently in a job interview, and the person who was interviewing me asked me, well, if you could just look back over your life and like describe your career to me in different blocks and what you learned from them, how would you describe it? And I thought, wow, there's nothing really that linear about my life that would allow me to do that, because I've meandered through basically all of it the whole time. And so I was a bit confronted with that question, thinking, wow, okay, yeah, where are the structures, external structures, that also hold things in place, that also sort of hold... I know that I have a treasure trove of experiences and information in me, because I'm curious, I like to learn, I dive into things. So I probably have the capacity to create structures or lean on structures that would be really helpful for me, and yet I fail to do it because I have such a strong internal locus of control. And then it's like, well, that's less important. So what's really obvious about my LinkedIn profile is I've worked on amazing concepts and projects, and my name is nowhere on those projects. And it always surprises people. Like, why weren't you named on, if you built this program, if you built Smiling Mind, why are you nowhere named on it? It's like, oh, because I don't really care about that. I just care that it influences 1.3 million children in Australia. And in some way that's true, but it's funny that I don't feel like I need to rely on the external systems, whereas I think the external systems are what allows us to see ourselves and also the world to see us. And so that's not really helpful.
I think it's in Carl Rogers' person-centered approaches to working with people. He talks about this internal and external locus of evaluation. The prescribed wisdom is that we gain this internal locus of evaluation as we get older. As we're growing up, we rely more on external things. That sounds like you're doing it the opposite,
the opposite
you're doing
way.
the opposite around.
Oh, yeah, that's really helpful, because maybe that's why life sometimes feels so hard, because I'm just swimming in the opposite direction to most fish.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And then all of a sudden, as I get older, it's like, oh, right, okay, now I need to flip a little bit into this direction.
Yeah. And I am learning to do it, but I do feel really childlike in it. You know, I feel really young in it and inexperienced, and it's that also makes it uncomfortable.
It's really funny, isn't it, though, because you think, okay, the things that we value or are valued by society. You know, you've mentioned a few things about your status or, your career and your house and the family thing. We value those things, so we pay attention to them. Yet, I wonder if at some fundamental level, we know that, yeah, they're important, those things, but actually underneath there's a wisdom or there's something that is really, really more important than that stuff that we need to listen to. But we're not encouraged to nurture that bit of us.
Yeah.
I can remember I was a governor at my kids' school. I think it was one of the reasons I decided to stop being a governor, because I had too many fallouts with the head teacher. But this particular one was they were doing a talk for sixth formers. So people were going into in England it's their A-levels, so it's the exams before they go to university or whatever. And the talk that she gave, it's meant to be an inspirational talk, was if you want to have a good career and be able to buy the house you want, then you need to do well in your A-levels.
Wow.
And I fell out quite badly with her about it. I said, man, that's just one way of viewing the world. And it's and I wonder if, you talked about Eastern and Western, it feels like there's this real struggle going on. What do we need to draw on to make real good, wise decisions in how we live in the world now?
Yeah.
And well, you might talk about East and Western, but it sounds like there's internal and external.
Mm-hmm.
I'm beginning to wonder what we can best offer to listeners to encourage them to work consciously with both the internal and external structures that bounce against their lives. Here, Eveline introduces two core components of the structure she finds so useful, naming fundamental beliefs and becoming curious about what I would love. you work with people in groups and one-to-one around some of this stuff, but what would you say to listeners, whatever role they're in? People who listen to this, some of them are teachers, some of them are coaches, some of them are facilitators, some of them are grandparents, and some of them are CEOs. There's a real range. But if there was something you'd like to say to, hey, here's an interesting thing that you could do to check out, where are you in this balance between internal and external reliance, that compassionate belief in yourself almost? What would be a useful thing for people to consider or reflect on?
There are a couple of things that come to mind. I mean, I wonder if the most helpful thing is to look at the balance between external and internal, and think a bit more of, hey, is there a place where the external experience, structure, story is not serving you? Or is there a place where you feel like some sort of fear, anxiety, like, oof, but if I do that, I don't know what's going to catch me, or what's going to happen next. You know, I think those are really interesting examples to work with. And then there are a couple of things that I would suggest. I mean, I think it's really, really, really helpful when we know about ourselves, what is the underlying belief? What's the underlying belief that's actually driving particular thoughts and feelings and behaviors? Because there will be somewhere some belief underneath that is keeping you in the situation that you're in, or that is creating actually maybe the unhelpful circumstances that you're experiencing in your life. And doing that without judgment, not as a way to self-criticize, because I think self-criticism is the quickest route away from this internal locus of control, right? I would say the way in is always through, just imagine that you're an alien and you've come to Earth and you're visiting this human for the day that you are. You're an alien visiting this human body and just sort of observing this experience, like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on with this particular belief? What are the thoughts, feelings, behaviors that belong to it? And then I would encourage people to literally take yourself into a 5-minute mindfulness practice, something that helps you to slow down. Maybe it's a beautiful song you listen to. Maybe it is a slow walk outside. Maybe it's just a cup of tea and nothing else. Maybe it's meditation. You know, find your way. Maybe it's deep breaths. But something that actually helps you to settle into a calmer state of mind. And then ask yourself, what would I really love right now? What would I really desire right now? Because I think that inner locus of control speaks to us when we ask those kinds of questions. It's a quiet voice. It's a voice full of imagination and desire, but desire in the purest form. And it's like, what would I really love is not usually, I would really love that person to stop being so outrageously challenging in my life, and I would like somebody to pick up all my bills. I mean, we would all probably love that. But what I would really love is more something around, I would love to be walking along the beach and feeling the sea breeze in my hair and knowing that I'm healthy and that I can feel the sand crunching under my toes. And I get to be here. I don't have to do anything else but just be here. And I feel free and I feel abundant. You know what I mean? Like, it's really allowing yourself to lean into those sorts of longings that are, I don't know, they're so sort of fundamental almost. And I think if you can lean into that more often, that's like awakening that inner voice, because that inner voice is there and that inner locus of control is there. It's always there. And it speaks to you in whispers. It speaks to you through what we would call intuition, right? But it's there. It'll tell you when something is actually the right thing for you or not, if we learn to listen to it. And it's shy. I love this idea that Parker J. Palmer presents about the soul being a shy thing. You have to get really quiet for it to show up. I think that's true. I think the inner voice is shy and it wants space and calm. And for most of your life, might not have been listening to it, so it also has maybe learned to shy away a bit. So I think that's what I would say. Yeah.
Sounds like there's a lot in that last bit that you've said, but I think, maybe an encouragement for you listeners to go away and create this time and this space and this quiet for two things, to maybe to recognise the fundamental belief part, which that may be uncomfortable, but just to be compassionate and say, and this other thing, allow these these desires, these longings for what is this? What do you really love? What would you love in your life to take place? So thank you for listening, and I'm going to say goodbye from the sandy dunes of Noordwijk and a dog who is still digging holes.